our second session on the dissemination of the research. And for now, we have two speakers with us, and we hope that the third one will join us. So I will begin with the introduction of the two speakers who are already here. The first is Dr. Dorina Baltag from Loughborough University, who's working in the field of international relations and European external relations, especially European neighborhood policy and diplomacy, and also doing a lot of work on communicating between the academia and entrepreneurship, as far as I remember, also specifically for female academics. And Dr. Baltag obtained her PhD degree from Loughborough University in 2018, and also studied in Maastricht University and in Moldova State University. She published in Routledge Handbook on the ENP, in the external governance and security community building with Palgrave, and also co-edited European Union and Central and Eastern Europe assessing performance, also with Routledge. Her work has also been published in the Hague Journal of Diplomacy, Stadia Diplomatica, East European Politics, European Integration Online Papers, and Norwegian Institute of International Affairs Working Papers, among others. Thank you for joining us today. It's not the first time you're with us at the DTA, and we are always happy to see you here and hear your thoughts with your extensive experience also of collaborating and disseminating your research among non-academic audiences. The second speaker who joined us today from a very different region, and I find it very fascinating how we have very different inputs also, because these things differ across Europe, of course. It's Maria Luisa Sanchez Barrueco. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly.
Fine.
From the Universidad de Deusto in Bilbao, Spain, where we were lucky. Actually, it was my first UASIS conference that I attended in Bilbao. It was a very nice one at Deusto. Maria is a senior lecturer at Deusto Law School, and she studied at Universitat Catholique de Louvain, studied law there, and also got an MA in European Politics and Administration at the College of Europe, and a PhD from the University of Deusto. So she works mostly on the European law and on institutional relations. She wrote a dissertation on the institutional relations of the European Court of Auditors. Her current research is dealing with financial accountability, European institutional law, and public ethics in the EU multi-level governance. She also published on EU visa policy. She published extensively in different languages, what might be interesting also in light of the discussion we had in the previous panel. So I was fascinated to see that she published in English, French, Spanish, and Basque, both books and articles, among others. Books with Routledge, the European Union as a global player in the field of human rights, and in Romanian Journal of European Affairs, Spanish Review of European Law, Croatian Yearbook of European Law, among others. So different types of publication as well, and there are also some titles that I unfortunately can't pronounce in Basque, so also in very different languages. I think it's a very interesting insight that we could gain from you. So, and let me just check. I think the third speaker, unfortunately, maybe there is a problem, so he's still not here. Yeah, he has some connection problems, so he might join us later, and when he joins us, I will introduce him. It's Matthias from Institut Barcelona, the Studios Internacionals, but I suggest we start because we have lots of interesting questions that we prepared. And as in the previous session, please feel free to post your questions to the chat box, and we will come back to them in the second part of the session. So as you know, our panel is addressing the dissemination of your research. So what to do once you are published, and how to get your research across, how to make people read it. And the first question I would like to ask our invited speakers about is, to what extent and why does it matter that researchers disseminate their research, and what are the main channels that people typically use and can use for the dissemination of the research. So feel free to start. Maybe Dorina, you look like you want to start.
I was smiling because you know, we are among friends here, and I do remember when I was in my first year of PhD, there was this question is perennial, so to speak. So you always had someone saying, well, okay, this is all romantic, but pragmatically, because we have to. And it was always a delicate balance for me, and until today it is, to to do a marriage between the pragmatism and the romanticism of publishing. You know, we publish because it matters, that is the authentic answer which I would give, but also because we have to. It's kind of your performance indicator, if you wish, and this is the world we're living in, and this is also important for your academic CV, but not only for the academic CV. As Olga mentioned, I also liaise a lot with the world of diplomats and think tankers, and there as well it matters, especially because they are looking for bright people which have been through academia, which have this academic rigor of doing research. So then it also matters in your CV yet again. Now with the channels of dissemination, I think this is the tricky part, which everyone, I would say, or at least I'm going to share my experience. I had to figure it out on my own. I was running around talking to different people at different stages in their careers and asking, you know, why do you choose this journal? Okay, what do you do then? Why did you start a Twitter channel? So I was very blunt, and my questions were very banal, if you wish. But then I said, okay, what makes sense to me? So I understood that I have different types of networks. I had a network in Eastern Europe, then I started a little network. When I say network, I mean a pool of contacts. Then in Brussels, but then via the UASs and let's say mediums like UASs. Then I started little contacts as well throughout people which were in the same year of PhD or were conducting their PhDs. And then I realized that for every type of audience, it's a different channel that matters to them. Let's put it like that. For my contacts in Eastern Europe, which were the donor community and the diplomatic community, which were also linked to my research, it's the social media which I would get in touch with them. But back in the day, when nobody was on social media yet, it actually was through email. So I had extensive list of emails of my contacts. You would be surprised, but even today, this actually also works, especially if I have conducted interviews with those people when the research is out. I actually send them an email, and the response was, we appreciate it, it's personal, it's not something you just posted out there for the sake of posting. Then if we also think of non-academic audience, it's LinkedIn that matters, but I think my experience is that you don't have to just publish and put it there. Look, this is something I published. You want to create a conversation, tell people why it is important. You know, what exactly is there? What are the key takeaways? And sometimes I even share the challenges. You know, we had a challenge and that led us to this article and etc. etc. If I write on Moldova, I even share my personal insights and my personal feelings sometimes, which also makes me connect to other audiences than academic. Well, of course, when it comes to academic dissemination, I think that's quite clear because all your institutions have a network of sorts, and then this would be your first contact point. I would also say Twitter, because people are there. But then again, I think we're going to have this question. Maybe we go a little bit more. But I think first and foremost, I just make a list of to whom I want to reach out and why do I want to do that and whether it matters or not. I'll stop here.
Thank you, Dorina, for your response. I think Matthias from Hout has just joined us. So before we turn to Maria for her thoughts on dissemination of research, I would also like to introduce our third speaker, Matthias from Hout, from the, as I said, from the Institut Barcelona de Estudis Internacionals, where we were supposed to have the in-person event, and for which we unfortunately had to switch to online. And thank you, Matthias, for joining us. And Matthias is an associate professor and research fellow at the Institute, a sociologist by training. So I think it's also an interesting, different point of view from the political science or international relations. He has a PhD from Brown University and worked in Manchester, Freie Universität and the Humboldt Universität in Berlin, and at Universidad de San Martin, and in our faculty also of Latin American faculty of Ciencias Sociales in Buenos Aires, and also in Mexico and Lima. So very extensive stays in Latin America, and his research is centrally concerned with identity politics, institutions, development, and comparative historical focus on Latin America. So he was widely published on nationalism and national belonging, how civil society negotiates and contests official nationalism. And he also was among the lucky recipients of a European Research Council Consolidator grants in 2019. For those early career researchers and PhDs, it's highly competitive grants that most of us hope to get at some point in our career. So congratulations, Matthias, and I think it's an amazing achievement. And he published with Cambridge University Press in Comparative Political Studies in Journals of Nations, Nationalism, and Journal of Ethnic and Migration Studies, and Journal of Latin American Studies, among others. So Matthias, we are still discussing the first question. To what extent and why does it matter that researchers disseminate their research, and what are the main channels for that researchers typically use to disseminate their research? I think at the moment, Maria, if you would like to continue, and then we will turn to Matthias, the last but not least. Thank you for joining us again.
So much for your kind introduction.
Thank you. So Maria?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, first of all, I wanted to thank you for the invitation. It's my first opportunity at the Graduate Forum, and it's really an honor for me to share with you my thoughts. These are rushed thoughts on dissemination based on my experience and observation of what other colleagues do. And first, I would like to stress that dissemination forms an integral part of research. This cannot be taken for granted because most of us step into research because we want to know more about things that we like, but we don't really think of dissemination as part of our research. And so we have to assume that dissemination is part of the job description of a researcher. And also because it takes precious time, it needs strategy, and it forces us to step out of our zone of comfort. So to that extent, it represents a learning opportunity. But for me, my dissemination efforts have helped me thrive in the profession. So I think it is we shouldn't look at dissemination as a chore, but as a learning opportunity. And thinking about the rationale of dissemination, I've put together my thoughts around 3 dimensions. First, researchers have some sort of social responsibility to build a bridge between science and everyday life, to convey complexity in a way that anyone can grasp the policy implications of a research or the societal implications. That citizens know what the meaning of research for their lives, and this includes sidelined groups in terms of ethnic origin or economic wealth, but also in terms of age. I see as a task for us to foster intergenerational dialogue. And also based on our earlier conversation, I have realized that I published also in non-majoritarian languages. So I earlier in my career, I published in Basque language, because I realized that there was no meaningful scientific contributions or scientific analysis on international law or European law. So I made my task to be the first one in publishing a textbook on EU law in Basque or in international law. So I think I always see that as part of my dissemination efforts. The second dimension, or the second rationale of dissemination is that it helps us position individually as experts in our field, and it will be rewarding, it may be rewarding in terms of broadening your professional chances. So this links to career advancement, because the days of academic living in an ivory tower, well, I have never seen myself as in an ivory tower, but rather in a submarine. These days are over. We cannot thrive without being present in society, and our administrators are interested to attract new students and scholars who give interviews or witness or policy debates are useful for our institutions. So think of dissemination in internal terms. So for instance, the more your dissemination strategy aligns with the marketing strategy of your institution, the better your career advancement prospects will be, because you will be the go-to expert when media knocks on the door of your institution for interviews or things alike. And also externally, because dissemination strategies form a central part of funding applications in the EU, because they represent evidences of that you have transferred knowledge to society. So again, dissemination means social responsibility, career advancement, and overall broadening your professional chances. The more you disseminate, the more professional opportunities will arise in the future. But this said, I think that everyone, or each of us, must think of dissemination in terms that fit into their own needs, their own wishes, and the needs, the means, and also your own identity. I think that each of us builds an identity of our own with regard to dissemination. And thinking ahead of this panel, I sort of identified different dissemination profiles, and it might be helpful for you to reflect in which one you see yourselves. So for instance, when I think of my colleagues, I see the advocate. So the advocate disseminator would be the one who wants to use their research to make changes in society, to foster changes in society. But there are another one that are the information disseminator, for instance. Average citizens and vulnerable groups deserve knowing the implications of my research in their lives. Or else you can become the creative disseminator. So look how original I am in displaying my research outputs and findings. I don't know, I did a podcast while I walk down the street, or I did an information peel, or I mean, this is not me, but some people instantly come to my mind when it comes to creativity disseminator. And finally, there is the self-promoter or institutional promoter. So I am present as an expert, and therefore I exist. So you can choose one of the profiles or a combination of them, and build your disseminator identity, taking it from, take these profiles and from there and build your own identity as disseminator. And finally, I think that it's really relevant to think of dissemination and research as a two-way road. You've asked the question in terms of dissemination of research, but you can also disseminate for research. The flexibility dissemination outputs allow is welcome to prepare for future research. For instance, many of my blog posts represent rush or quick analysis on events, on new legislation, or new institutional reports. And I'm not constrained by the limitations of peer-reviewed papers. I can reflect freely my instant thoughts, and I've realized that quick analysis proves useful when I wish to turn the whole package into a publishable paper. So you think of dissemination as ex post and ex ante. So I will stop here. Sorry for taking that long.
Thank you very much. I think especially the idea of different profiles is a very interesting one. And for us in the beginning of our careers looking for the strategies, it's a very good advice to also think in this profile sense. Thank you so much. And finally, Matthias, would you like to add something as well about the importance of dissemination and why should we do it at all, disseminate our research, and how, in which channels should we do it?
Yeah, thank you so much for the invitation to be here and to talk to you. And also sorry for the delay. I had some internet issues here, but I'm happy to be finally here. In any case, I think when it comes to dissemination, first of all, I ask myself, okay, so how do I learn about new research? And that's rather personal, but I think so this probably helps us to get a broader sense of sort of what are possible channels of dissemination. And I would like to, I think maybe that's a sociologist here, to suggest a basic typology here. Yeah, like sort of making the holy cross of typology building that sociologists like to do, sort of to distinguish between academic and non-academic channels of dissemination that we can use, but also between formal and informal channels. Yeah, formal meaning, for example, academic work. It's the publications, the journal publications, the book chapters, the books that are published, but also presentations and talks. But then there are also more informal channels, namely the coffee breaks at conferences where you add your interactions with your peers in like from your PhD cohorts, and more informal interactions. So let me go through these, sort of when you distinguish between academic, non-academic, and formal versus informal settings of dissemination, and just kind of to get a sense of what channels are out there. So and I think when talking about channels of dissemination, I think is to keep the traditional, the formal academic ones remain important. Presentations, talks, academic publications. But I think something to and that's obviously these are remain prime channels of dissemination. And I'm saying this also in light of my, I mean, I think you invited me because I've written policy briefs, yeah, throughout my, repeatedly, and I enjoy this quite a bit. But in order for me to write policy briefs, and in order to be invited to do this, yeah, this had a lot to do with, yeah, what I have previously published through academic dissemination channels, and also in what kind of research groups and research networks I was busy. So in terms, so there was a sequence. So I did not start out as a PhD student to write policy briefs. Yeah. So I was very focused on academic publications, and then the invitation to write policies, then policy briefs then came subsequently. Okay. Then what I would wish to highlight, like within the academic formal quadrant of dissemination, and here's also this question: how do I learn about new research from colleagues and also from junior colleagues myself? Is section newsletters, yeah, in the organization. Like if you're a member of, I don't know, the Latin American Studies Association or the American Political Science Association or EPSA and so on. These and then particular sections in there, let's say quantitative methodology or comparative politics, they're usually section newsletters, and that allow you to, yeah, to a new paper to present also there. And many colleagues, including myself, like go through these section newsletters. So that's something that might often fall off the bandwagon, but to think about. The other thing is, and that's also as someone who's a little bit more senior, is prize committees. Yeah, you learn. I learn about new research by being member of prize committees for, I don't know, the best dissertation prize in comparative politics, or whatever, best book recently published in Latin American politics. Like these kind of committees are really for senior researchers, where they're okay, so what's out there right now? So in that sense, do not hold back in submitting your work. Yeah, section newsletters and prize committees. And these are, so in that sense, yeah, they should also be part of when you think about channels of dissemination. Informal academic, yeah, and what I mean here is, okay, so you go to a conference, you go to a workshop, you present your work, and that's certainly important. You are invited because of your expertise in a particular area to do so, or whatever, you have paid for, or you enjoy going to this particular conference and you go there, fine. But then there are these events such as coffee breaks, you know, receptions or dinners and so on. And these are often chances to talk informally, either to your peers, to other PhD students that you got to know, but also to senior colleagues. And in these informal settings, so don't neglect. I mean, they can be fun, and but don't neglect the importance of it. Because I'm saying this because I often remember people, because I had not necessarily, I haven't read their work, but I remember talking to them in one of these settings, and I had a really fun and engaging conversation with that person, and they remember, okay. And then let's say I'm writing a handbook chapter on nationalism, and I want to cover something on nationalism and cuisine, national cuisines. And it's not my area of research, but and then I remember, okay, I talked to I remember this guy I talked to at this conference, yeah, and he kind of worked on this. So I looked him or her up, yeah, and then, okay, so she works on this topic, and so, okay, so she has finished her book on it, and it was really interesting to her. Then I put that in. So in that sense, dissemination also works through these more fuzzy informal channels, yeah. So this is not to put pressure that right now every like fun conversation you have with a peer turns into a potential citation later on, yeah, and you shouldn't approach it that way. But it is just to keep in mind, yeah, that this is also like when you think of dissemination, this is also part of the game. And to some of you, this might come easier and natural, yeah, but others who don't like these kinds of, that's perfectly fine. But then for those of you who don't like these kind of informal settings, or these, often there are also like, you know, there are these hierarchies at play. So then, but I still would recommend then whatever is comfortable in those settings, you have to just have an informal and fun conversation with people, and that then through the back door sometimes, yeah, leads to actual dissemination of your work in a very indirect manner. Then, I don't know, I mean, I've been talking a lot, so I don't want to, but then there's the non-academic formal things such as reports, policy briefs, maybe a little bit less formal is blogs, and Maria Luisa has already talked about the usefulness of blogs for, but I think in general, my experience with policy briefs is the following. I like them because they force you to write for someone who's not part of the kind of narrow scholarly debates you're engaging in with your academic work. And you need to kind of say, okay, so what's the bigger point of this, what I'm doing? Yeah, and what's the broader relevance? And they force you to really think this through clearly and to articulate it. And in that sense, yeah, writing a policy brief or blog also then helps you, yeah, with further down the line with, yeah, then in being in a grant application, being clearer about, okay, sort of what's really the substantive importance of this, rather than, I don't know, what's the substantive importance of looking at the relationship between political regimes and natural resource wealth, yeah, rather than, okay, so your work might be about kind of introducing a new measure of resource wealth, yeah, and that's perfectly fine within your in your field, but communicating in terms of policy briefs and blogs more broadly sort of is, okay, so what's really at stake here with my research on, yeah, on the relationship between political regime and research wealth. So yeah, but look, I leave it at that. So in order to also have time for the other questions.
Thank you all so much for your input. I think it's actually, you touched upon our next question a little bit. So we have different channels, and depending on our profile or strategy, of course, we are exposed to different channels in a different way. You mentioned the traditional academic audience channels and the non-academic audience, which might be also important in case you want to change your careers, for example. I think you also highlighted it partially, but engaging with other stakeholders might also help you if you want to find a career outside of academia. But what would be your advice, given that we have so many different outputs, so books, journals, articles, and then we have this blogs, social media, which takes time as well, and podcasts, as Maria mentioned, as an option of disseminating your research. What would be your advice to the early career researchers, to PhDs, regarding which outputs to prioritize when thinking about research dissemination, and also which of these investments have a higher return on an academic CV? So basically, whether it's worth time to spend the time on all of them, or whether you should really think about the way of prioritizing specific ones, and which should it be in the case of your of the wish for an academic career. So if you lost me at some point, so my second question was about prioritizing the different output channels, different ways of promoting your research, chapters, articles versus blog posts and podcasts. So what would you recommend for people striving for an academic career? What should we invest our time in doing? Whether this should be traditional ones, or traditional outputs for the research, or non-traditional ones. So what would be your advice about the time and investment on the time returns, so to say, for these ways of disseminating your research? So,
yeah, again, a very good question. I'll be very mindful of time so that we leave space for Q&As as well. I think one message across, which comes from what the previous speaker said just before, is that we are disseminating non-stop. So this is part of you the moment you start. And my 2 cents is always like this. Nothing that we say should be taken as, you know, we are the experts. I think I'll speak for myself saying that at different points in time, I have reviewed the strategy. I think what helped me was to become mindful of who I am, who I want to be, and which direction in my career I want to move forward. And my way of doing things is called multiple eggs in multiple baskets. I also know, because this is made sense for me since I was a little kid. I like to have many opportunities open. But I also know colleagues that did not enjoy that strategy. Hence, what is the investment which will have a higher return? I think none of us can tell you. It will be only or solely on you to decide what makes sense to you. And I always say, does it feel right as well? You know, just going for all this sort of formats only because, you know, there is some sort of external pressure, I think then you shouldn't go for it. But you can build a strategy along the lines that that have been said. You know, you need to understand, what do you want to achieve? Do you want to stay in academic circles? Is this the type of job you want to pursue after the PhD? Then I think that will dictate your direction. And first and foremost, you will prioritize, and your investment will be for academic channels. And here you will think about, you know, the traditional things, peer-reviewed articles in journal articles. This will also imply book chapters, participating in conferences, but also reaching out then to non-academic circles that link to that. And this would be in the media. It can be an op-ed, it can be a blog post, which is on the side of your PhD. And I know many that have been successful that kept a blog, for example, on digital diplomacy while they were writing a PhD on the digital diplomacy. And then it transformed into actually the investment was the return on investment was very high, because the blog helped the person reach out to different audiences. And that was not only diplomats or policy practitioners, but also to citizens who, you know, were living in COVID times and were saying, okay, what is happening right here, right now? So in this sense, I think what I want to maybe reverse the question is not only about the main advantages of disseminating research for different channels, but maybe sit down and reflect what are the main disadvantages. Because besides the PhD, you also, if you want to stay in academia, you are involved in teaching and developing skills in this direction, and maybe being part of teaching and learning type of networks and events. So I would say mindfulness comes first in my case.
Thank you so much for your input. And
but maybe if I can give one quick example, because I just remembered, you know, I was already done with my PhD, but I think I saw Carlos in the audience. So we had this amazing opportunity to do a training on developing teaching case studies based on the Harvard methodology. And I think for us, this was a great return on investment, because a teaching case study is relevant not only in academic circles, but also in non-academic circles as well, because it's a different way of approaching the data that we have in our PhDs. So I would say in this sense, just look out for whether can I dedicate time to this, how much it will take me to invest in, and you know, it has to make sense to what you want to do in your career.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I think also kind of go with your personal feeling. Yeah, right. Like you said, I think it's also very important advice, because we feel pressured from all the sides to
linking to your career objectives.
To try to do everything at the same time and write the PhDs as well at the same time. Thank you. So Maria, did you want to add something? Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to add to what Dorina said, with which I agree fully. Just recall that dissemination should be an extension of yourselves. So try and tailor dissemination to your own identity and create a dissemination strategy. Because the point is not to let dissemination predate your research. So at the moment in time, you should stop to reflect, what are the steps I'm going to take when I organize a panel at a conference? What will I do when I publish a paper? What will I do when I invite an expert to my institution or to talk to my students? And have a document wherever in your laptop, clearly stating these steps, so that they become part of your daily schedule or monthly or yearly schedule, and they do not take any thinking effort on a given day, but you have that integrated into your working methods. And to that extent, I would not give advice, because, as I said before, I think that local or national culture plays a key role, and there's no use in following the recipes that work in a different country. Approaches to dissemination vary from northern, southern, to eastern countries. So you should really reflect in terms of disseminating where you are. And thinking in longitudinal terms, so taking into account the time dimension, I would also split my dissemination strategy into two different strategies. One, the baseline dissemination. So on a regular basis, how do I intend to disseminate? And again, integrate that into your agenda. Do not let a publication go without ticking on the boxes of social media, a tweet thread, a short post on LinkedIn, an email to colleagues to share my publications. Depending if it fits into my teaching activities, I might build a case study or a video appeal for my students. So while the publication is still hot, do that, because if you let a month go, you will be working on a different project and you won't recall to do that, and it's a missed opportunity. So a baseline dissemination integrated into your own agenda, working agenda, so that it doesn't take a thinking effort for you. And then the second dimension, or the second type of dissemination, I would say it's a structured dissemination in the framework of a project. If you have got funding for a project, there is a whole set of dissemination tools that you have to put in place, and you are not going to waste that effort into your baseline dissemination strategy if it is not in the framework of a project. That could be a newsletter or a blog or whatever. For instance, I have a blog, but I don't feed it if it's not for the support of an ongoing project, because it takes much time for me. So baseline dissemination strategy versus structured dissemination strategy. That's it.
Thank you so much for your input. And also, I think the previous profile idea and strategies was an important thing for this. So you reiterated it again for us. Thank you so much. And Matthias, what are your views on the prioritizing of different channels and also your experiences?
Yeah, and not much has been covered by by the previous two speakers already, but I think, yeah, a crucial question is whether you, I mean, whether the PhD is for you in your career a stepping stone towards a non-academic or an academic position. And I think that has implications for what kind of dissemination channels you use, because if you play with the idea of going into a non-academic track, let's say a thing like a job in a think tank or a consultancy, for example, then obviously showing that you're fluent and in different registers of dissemination, yeah, such as writing up a blog style piece, writing up a policy brief, doing a podcast, certainly has disadvantages and signals marketable skills. Yeah, so I think, and that should then certainly be honed, yeah, in when you disseminate your work. But if the preference or priority is to position yourself into the academic market, then clearly yeah, sort of the baseline academic, sort of the baseline dissemination channels, yeah, that were just talked about by, and clearly that's the recipe. So my recommendation is clearly focus on yeah, sort of the academic baseline channels that were just outlined in order to disseminate your work, and then use non-academic channels, yeah, that you feel comfortable with, yeah, and that are like, treat them like a hobby or something that, so if you like speaking, doing podcasts, if this format is something you enjoy, then really use this. Or if you like writing for non-academic audiences, then focus on this. But it's in a way, look, I can tell you from my experience hiring postdoctoral researchers who just completed their PhD for my ESC project recently. I mean, what do I look for in a CV? Yeah, I mean, I have 90 applications and I need to make a decision. Yeah, and to make an offer to 3 candidates. Yeah, so that's what we're talking about. What do I look for in a CV? Clearly publications and a clearly written cover letter and a well-organized CV. That's absolutely crucial. Yeah, that's the baseline. Yeah, and that gets you onto the long short list. But then things, oh, okay, so that person has experience in publishing for a newspaper, or she has done a podcast series and so on. That's additional add-ons that then might yeah, sort of might influence and yeah, on that long list might give a push towards an interview or not. But it's not really like in the academic job market. It's really, I mean, I can just it's a nice add-on, but it's not essential. And therefore, my plea, when you move to disseminate into sort of beyond academia, I suggest to use the channels that feel like something that you're comfortable with, and that's something that you enjoy doing, yeah, and that comes naturally to you. But don't do it just for the sake of doing it. Okay.
Thank you so much. And as most, like all of you mentioned, that of course in disseminating research via different channels, you address different audiences and you have to speak to them in a different way. And I think especially if you're used to work in the academic field, it might be a bit of a problem to change the way you present your research. So do you have any advice or any tips on how to communicate with different audiences and how to develop at least your skills in writing for different audiences based on your expertise?
I was listening to what Matthias was saying previously, and I think I resonated a lot because I had the opportunity to sit on one of the hiring committees, and I was just observing, but it was such an amazing experience. So if you have the opportunity, please go to that. I just wanted to add something. You can just sit and then you will see that the committee can tell when the dossier is not authentic, or it's just too good or too polished, or there are question marks about certain things. And I think that's a very valuable experience. It was useful for me at least. Yeah, just to follow on the skills, I think it's a tough nut to crack. I have had the opportunity even before, from high school onwards, to be part of a debate consortium, and then I became a coach in debating. Hence, that helped me a lot in public speaking, because some channels of dissemination, if we're thinking of a podcast, or if we're thinking of relating to the media, and very often in your own home countries, and that's also media engagement. They are looking for your expertise, specifically because you build an expertise outside of the country, which for a country like Moldova or Romania is important and relevant. On top of that, I also had the opportunity to actually go to different seminars on writing a policy brief. And I must say, it felt like, okay, that's an easy, sure, yeah, that's possible. Now, it takes a lot of exercise and repetition. And I think, the Latin phrase, repetitium est mater studiorum, actually came to me. So any skill, you will be able to master it in time. There are some caveats which can be done. And let's take an example. For, let's say, one section of your PhD, something that you're going to the UASIS conference with. Then you are already in this head of dissemination. At the same time, as Maria was saying at the beginning, but maybe you have also some opinion or insight based on that particular section, but you don't have a blog of your own, and you don't have time to invest. But then UASIS has a blog, so you can try and submit there, and then you're going to get reviews. Or maybe you say, okay, there is the LSE academic blog post, then there are the blogs of your own departments or universities, or as Matthias said, the newsletter. And it sounds very banal, but this is a routine that you start building and saying, but I think I would choose first one direction, make sure that I start mastering and it's easy for me to do, and then build on the next one. I would also say, to develop a skill, you can also do it outside of academic circles. So for example, I'm involved in the community of Moldovan expats, professional expats, and there I have my own podcast where I lead a show and I interview Moldovan experts from different areas. It is in Romanian, it's for a very niche market, so to speak, but it gave me an opportunity to actually develop a skill in my own mother tongue, and then I'm able to replicate it somewhere else. I would say, so probably to recap, go to courses, choose one or two different types of, let's say, channels that you want to test, be it a blog post, start small, or a podcast show, as way of example. Start writing or doing them, and always ask for feedback. But I would also say do courses. I think sometimes a weekend course can actually give you so much. And I'm going to add here a different way you can also use it, and maybe for some people it will be up there early. In the professional field, whether you want to stay in academia or outside, if you don't have a LinkedIn Pro portfolio, and I'm not saying copy paste your CV to LinkedIn, please don't do that. That makes no sense for LinkedIn. And there you have the opportunity for articles. And these articles are not a blog post and are not a policy brief. So you have to figure out, and based on the identities that Maria was talking about, you can build your own identity and your own narrative. I started publishing there on a need, which I felt that there is when it came to transferability of skills of early career researchers. And that's how I built a community, and I was testing something there. And that's where you receive feedback. That's where you start a conversation. And that's where, you know, you also are disseminating, maybe not necessarily the results of your PhD, but the academic world, and the non-academic one is so much bigger than just your PhD. Again, think of those strategies that have been mentioned here, create your own. I definitely have an Excel file. I actually had throughout the PhD and right now different ones, and they are all linked. It can be in the form of a Gantt chart if somebody remembers or uses them. I find them very useful, or you can build your own, which can have also this formal, informal, academic, non-academic dimension that Matthias mentioned. Use anything that makes sense to you. One thing that I also had there during my PhD is to also look at book publishers and see what they are doing, because some of them also were thinking of disseminating. And you can write a monograph, but you can also write a short, and a short is a totally different monster. And again, it's a different channel. You have to ask yourself, does it make sense to you? I'll stop here.
Thank you very much. And before we turn to Maria, I also want to remind everybody about the UASIS Graduate Forum Crossroads Europe blog, which might be, especially for the early career researchers or early stages of PhD, a good stepping stone, because we are pretty generous on what we publish and the turnout is pretty quick. So I know that some of our members, they approached us even in the job hunting stage, asking to process the blogs within a couple of weeks because we needed something to show for. So have a look at our UASIS Graduate Forum page, and feel free to approach us as well if you have an idea for a blog. We publish very different things.
May I add one point here? Also, don't be shy to you know, get in touch with other academics or so. You know, I just saw Isabel here in the audience, and I know that we, you know, I think also at the UASIS conference we met, and then that led to us writing together an article which was published in Democratization. And just recently, one of my previous students, we wrote together with her, and she said, I don't want to publish in an academic outlet. Can you help me publish somewhere else? And I think many of us are open to support you where we intersect, obviously, in your way.
Thank you so much for this kind offer. So Maria, would you like to add something as well on your experience and some tips from your side?
Just a few words on this difficult question, because really building skills to disseminate is perhaps the most challenging aspect, but it's also an inspiring one to the extent that you see your learning process and you see that you improve over time. And this is a really rewarding realization when you realize that originally you were timid and you didn't engage with other academics in conferences, and now you do. That originally you didn't, I mean, you were into academic writing, but now you are able to write posts on a relatively short time. So this is inspiring, and this builds up your self-esteem as well. So I will just highlight the points that Dorina did. Training courses are really important, but also observation. Observe how others do and adapt it to your own needs, means, and identity. I'm not meaning to copy others, but to learn from others through observation. Very often you don't need to pay for a training course to learn how to learn recognizing the structure of a blog that seems attractive to you, or how to build a video peel, or I mean, similar outputs. Just you see how others do, and then you adapt it to your own situation. And with regard to dissemination to a non-scientific audience, I would really stress something that Matthias said earlier, the importance of networking. Because professional opportunities to disseminate to high-level non-professional audiences arise usually from networking. I mean, I can share with you my personal experience. I started in 2010 attending UASIS conferences. I built a network on EU finances, which is the core of my research. The network the informal network led to a collaborative network, a research network on UASIS. Then these became bigger, and when a member of the network couldn't cope or couldn't address a request from non-scientific audiences, they always referred to, or they occasionally referred to me as a go-to expert. And then I had to tackle my imposter syndrome head-on and accept the challenges as learning opportunities, and use them as a stepping stone towards advancing in your career. And that's how I got to the British Parliament, for instance, or the European Parliament. I work regularly with the European Parliament on consultancy projects. And if I think back in time, these very inspiring opportunities, professional opportunities, all of them arose in the framework of networking results. So this is a never-ending process. You don't wake up one day and suddenly realize that you have achieved the skills to produce different outputs. This is a never-ending process, and you learn by doing. So my advice, which is a poor one, a self-evident one, is step out of your zone of comfort, realize what your gaps are, and tackle them head on. And I will stop here.
Thank you so much for your input. And just to remind, if you have any additional questions or want to ask our speakers about any other points on disseminating the research, please feel free to use the chat box. So the next question I have from our side is the question about the open access publications, which are becoming increasingly popular because they, of course, remove the barrier of the accessing the publications, so also helped to disseminate the research easier. And in many cases, of course, they also require a large financial investment on the part of the researcher, and not every university has any way of supporting it or funding schemes. So to what extent, in your opinion, is it advisable for a researcher with a limited budget to publish open access or to strive to publish in open access? And whether you know of any maybe funding schemes specifically designed for researchers with a limited budget that wish to publish their research open access in your countries, I think, or in general. So if you are aware and could give us any advice on the funding as well. So who would like to?
Maybe this one from Matthias or Maria, or
yeah, maybe Maria wanted to start.
Yeah, I want to start because my answer is going to be very short and politically incorrect, possibly. I don't personally publish in open access form due to the lack of funds, and this has to do with the local culture. In Spain, we don't get funding. Universities don't have a designated budgetary line to support open access publications, and this is always related to funding projects or something like that. So I don't invest funds in publishing open access, and I would strongly advise against using personal funding for open access. I don't think it's worth. Now, the broader audience your research gets, the better your career options are. So there are other options to disseminate your research, such as, for instance, publishing your preprints in online repositories such as ResearchGate. I do it always, and so I think it is not necessary to go for prepaid open access publications when you have an online repository option. And that's it.
Thank you so much. So who would like to go next? I think Matthias, you wanted to add something on this topic?
I mean, that's basically, I mean, the whole open access issue is a major matter of debate, because it's basically the journals are getting content for free. Yeah? I mean, academics are not paid for submitting articles to journals. And then on top of that, the same academic that has written the article is supposed to pay 2,500 euros or 3,000 euros for open access. I think the logic of the system here, I mean, it's questionable and it's currently challenged. And I mean, in the bigger scheme of things, I think there needs to be a deal, for example, between the European Union and publishers. I mean, this needs to be regulated. Yeah. But anyway, so that's my political concern with open access. That said, yeah, I mean, with the European grants and it's written into the, then you have the resources, and then my team and I, we publish open access, yeah, for better or for worse, even though I don't like it, yeah, for political reasons. But I think it's absolutely what Maria Luisa said, like, use your universities or your institutions' open repository to publish the last preprint version, load it up there as a PDF, put it on your personal website. And I think that's something like at the very basics, like have like a professional looking, simple personal website where you can also upload preprint PDFs. Yeah, and that also gives people, when they Google you, a sense of who you are as an academic or as a researcher, as a public intellectual, and use this. And I think, look, as long as I find a PDF of an article that I'm interested in, yeah, I don't care whether it's the open repository version or whether I get it from ResearchGate or whether I get it open access. Yeah, as long as I can find a PDF from it, that's quintessential, not whether it's open access or not.
I absolutely agree. I'm just going to second everything that has been said. I am in London, at Loughborough University London campus, and I had in the last year with 2 publications. In democratization and global affairs, there were 2 stories, and I was trying to understand the whole discussion about open access. But I find it highly unfair that you are giving your intellectual property to an entity that is making money out of it, and you're not being paid for it. I think, free labor for me feels a bit like an academic slavery type of scenario. And as an early career researcher, you're struggling with so many unknowns and uncertainties, and this is one extra layer that I will add. So, but the Loughborough University is very generous in this sense, so they have been supportive of the open access. However, when you are the second offer in that publication, then it becomes a little bit tricky. And I will say there are different strategies that you can approach in this sense, because it links again to the fact that once you start writing a piece of research, you already think of dissemination. You want to engage with different audiences, right? Or you want to this type of scientific knowledge to be accessible to the broader public. So if you already think of that, and I'll give the example of the one for which we couldn't have open access, is what we did. We said, all right, we're going to publish it in this outlet, and then before that, we already went to a conference and we reached out to the academic audience. But after that, we went to the Institute speaker series, where we know there are already practitioners also invited through the network of the Institute. And that has been an amazing 2-hour discussion with so many reflections, which was useful to us. And at the same time, we also thought, let's write a blog, a blog post where we're not in all these areas, we do not regurgitate what's in the article. And I think that's very important. The article is the research academic peer-reviewed article is the article, and the blog post is the blog post. And you have to understand what you want to say, what are the messages, what are the cutting across themes that you want to relate and to whom. And I think this for us was a strategy which we have considered from the very beginning, and that was very helpful and easy to do. So I would advise never use your own budget, which is super limited for things like that. I think I would rather prioritize participation in a conference or going into a training, which will, you know, bring me some new skills or advance my current skills over open access. Absolutely.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your input. I think also just from my side, in my personal experience and advice as well, to check before maybe you have it at your university, maybe you have some kind of open access scheme, but you just don't know about it. Because I recently also found out that at my university in Vienna, we have an opportunity to apply for free open access publications per year. And I was working here for 2 years and was not aware about it, because I just realized that some of my colleagues who don't have budget publish open access, and looked into the opportunities and found out that there is something. So in case you are looking to pursue this strategy, just check what is available where. I think also from our side, from UASIS, we sometimes have a graduate forum or UASIS general grants, which you can also partially use for these publications, depending of course on the costs. So it's up to you to decide what you can do. And since I don't see any questions in the chat box, I will come to the final question, which kind of sums up all your experiences and also your amazing tips. So what would you say about the do's and don'ts in disseminating your research? I think also just what shouldn't we do? You also, for example, mentioned publishing the preprints. I recently came across colleagues who are publishing preprints on their websites of the papers that are currently in peer review, and was surprised to see these things. So what are your personal your recommendations on do's and don'ts in disseminating the research? What would be advisable? So we would like to start the final round. Let's see, Maria. Yeah.
Yeah, fine. Well, I mean, just to synthesize my previous thoughts. So in terms of do's, wake up to reality. Dissemination is part of your research. Second, think of what type of disseminator you wish to become and review it on a regular basis. Third, build strategies and protocols to facilitate your planning so that dissemination tasks do neither distract you from your tasks nor become an unwanted source of stress for you. So think in terms of purpose in a proactive way and not so much reactive. I remember, I mean, incidentally, I remember a project in which I realized at the very last moment that I had to produce evidences of dissemination. And I spent the whole summer writing posts that should have been published 2 years before because I hadn't planned for that. So I'm the very best example of non-structured dissemination strategies, and also focus on observing what others do. And don't let dissemination predate your research, and don't focus on dissemination in a non-structured, non-reflected way. And that's it.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So would like to add something? I think we have so many interesting insights from your side, but I think especially the don'ts part is the one that we haven't addressed so much so far. Yes, Matthias?
No, two things, I mean, very idiosyncratically on the don'ts part, especially initially in your career, don't spread yourself too thinly in your academic output, meaning that you rush from one topic to another. You might be bored to death by your dissertation after 4 years, but your wider audience don't know this, yeah, and you need to get, yeah, these 4 years of work out, yeah. And so, I mean, it might sound a little bit, I'm sorry if this sounds politically incorrect, but you need to pee into the same corner until it stings, yeah, meaning several articles on a related topic, so that you become known as, okay, so she works on public health and elections in sub-Saharan Africa. So she is a specialist on that. Oh, he works on nationalism and education in Latin America. So rather than, okay, sort of having one article on this and then moving on to a completely different topic. Yeah, obviously this might increase the, you know, the boringness, but I get, and you know, academic probably it's a slow moving process that might be sometimes frustrating, but get a couple of things out that kind of hang together and create your identity as a scholar. Then I might be old school here, but I mean, don't get engaged overly in Twitter, in opinionating on everything on a sun. Use it deliberately to promote your work, yeah, and that of colleagues you value. But anyway, so you asked me about two don'ts, yeah, and there you have it.
Thank you so much. Yeah, Dorina,
maybe I'll pick up on that, but Matthias, I would disagree a little bit. Instead of just using Twitter as a promotion channel, don't use it. Use it as your information box to get information, because if you want to build something on Twitter, I think it's a bit of a different tool. It can be very useful for you, but yeah, you can of course promote yourself. That's one way to do it, but that's actually where it's about building a communication. And of course, we need to become experts before we start blabbering everything that comes to our mind. And it's a very tricky channel. So I say there are specific trainings to understand how Twitter works. So, you know, just maybe to put emphasis on what I heard from Matthias on this birth is just to be very conscious of what channels you use, why you're using them, instead of just, so I go for quality over quantity, maybe, if I can say like that. I put a couple of do's and don'ts, and maybe they sum up what everyone has been saying so far. I think for me, in this category of our topic, it's important to consider my career goals and then link them to a personal map that I'm making of the dissemination channels and my research outputs, making a plan and being consistent, and then trying it for, let's say, 1 year or a couple of months, and then understanding and learning from it, because it's a learning process. Do invest in yourself, first of all, you know, whether it's skills or knowledge or building contacts. And here, of course, it's very important to remember that you are not alone. So you're not doing this in a vacuum and in a bubble. We're no longer in an ivory tunnel, in an ivory tower. So connect, create connections or build communities or network, whichever you fancy. And on the don'ts, I would say, do not copy and paste. Do not be afraid of failure. I think it's the most awesome opportunity to actually learn and thrive. And maybe do not worry too much about the dissemination channels and the technicalities of it. And I think what the pandemic showed us, that mental health is very, very important. It's so easy to, be trapped between your own 2 years. So maybe give yourself time and space to become a natural at this dissemination playing game, so to speak. And that's it.
Thank you so much. And before we wrap up, I have one question in the chat, but I think it would be pretty easy to quickly respond to this question. It's a question from Mohsen Yarali. Can we really earn money through a research publication? So what would you say before we wrap up the session? I think it's also kind of monetizing your research dissemination.
I'll quickly share the latest experiences that I have, but maybe the question for me was not, can I make money through a research publication particularly? But for example, I just came back from a think tank in Prague, where I was stationed, for which I applied for a specific 2 months stay there, which was paid. So if you want to understand it like that, then your 2 months of research, which you're going to do, which is actually a policy paper. It's in between a policy brief and a policy paper, what I did, then yes, it's being paid for. And then if you're thinking of the other example, which I gave, we were also selected to be part of this Harvard case study model trainings. And then our outputs, Carlos was also there, he can share as well, were paid. And this is nice. So these are things which you look out for, you apply. It's a little bit of a competition, but then you can be paid for parts of your research. But I think Maria and Matthias have a much better or longer experience in this sense.
I can share my personal experience. I think that you cannot, in Spain, I mean, talking from personal here, in Spain, you cannot earn money through a publication. But in the long run, targeted publications can lead you to the places where you get money, and otherwise you wouldn't get there. So you have to see publications as a long-term investment towards becoming a go-to expert for paid work, or to become an external consultant. I mean, a rather regular destination of PhDs is think tanks or experts working for national or European administration on short-term contracts. But before you get there, you have to make yourself or earn yourself a name as an expert. So yeah, that will be it. And there are some places where universities pay very well for publications, high impact publications. I remember talking about a colleague from Ghana, talking about high level universities in their country paying for 20,000 euros per paper published in the ECR. So this, I mean, for me, that never happened. But there are universities in developing countries where you can get that. I don't know if that is your case, Mohsen. I know that high-level universities, in certain high-level universities in Colombia, in Latin America, but particularly in Colombia, do that because they want to position themselves higher at a higher place in the university ranks, international rankings. Okay, but I think that is an exception. I mean, if I went to my administrator telling him or her that I just published an article in first quartile review on the Web of Science, he would probably ask, what is the Web of Science? So, I mean, you do that for the long term. or else you look for a well-positioned university in a developing countries. So that will be it.
Matthias?
I mean, yeah, short answer to the question is, well, I mean, the bottom line is, I think, to put it crudely, we're paid for teaching, but our reputation is made through research. Yeah, so that's kind of the tension we're working in. But to further qualify this, yes, there are places that pay bonuses for Q1 or even Q2 publications. It has an effect on how quickly you move up the career ladder at your respective place. So in that sense, indirectly, publishing your research, yeah, further advances you then also on the pay scale. And then, yeah, there are, especially once you're a little bit senior, there are so-called commission papers. Yeah, that usually start out as working papers on a certain topic. And for example, I've been doing this for UNU Wider in Helsinki. So you're asked to write a paper broadly on a certain topic, or to do a lit review on X, and then this is remunerated. But again, I mean, the actual writing, I mean, it's not the case that a journal will pay you for publishing it. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you so much. Just to quickly add as well, from my experience, you're completely right. In some countries, even as far as I know, in Russia, in the very well-known universities, the salaries of professors and assistant professors are the same, but the major boost to your salary comes from your publications. So some countries have this bonus system, which there are pro and contra views in this sense, especially given the topic that we discussed before of fast-tracked publications. But it is indeed a practice in some countries. And also just to add, I think for all, especially PhD and PhD researchers, there are also prize money sometimes for your research, for your PhD or for your articles. So I think it's also a way to earn money, but in the long term, like you say, from the books, I know from the experience of one of my colleagues who published a very well sold, book sold across the world. He's always posting on Twitter how he gets like 5 cents per book or something. So it's not a huge amount of money that he can even withdraw from the publisher's accounts, because he cannot reach the amount of money you're allowed to withdraw, something like €5. So it can be very different, you're right. I would like to thank all our speakers for your inputs. I think we had so many interesting insights on how to disseminate your research, how the strategies of creating your own profile, which are very important for all of us in the beginning of our careers, and very interesting insights into the different practices across different countries. So thank you so much for agreeing to speak today, and we were so lucky to have you. Thank you, and we would be happy to see you again, especially for those who are the first time speakers. We are always happy to see people again in our events. So we will for sure reach out to you again. Thank you so much. And for the participants, we are now having a 1-hour lunch break. And as before, you can switch off the camera and mute it, or you can also come back and use the opportunity to network a little bit. And we will be back in an hour with our final panel of the day. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Thank you, Olga. Bye.
Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you, Olga.